It is episode 92. Today we discussed some things from Ignite. I am Michael Askins, architect and technologist, and this is the Technology Architecture Solution Engineering Show coming to you from our virtual studios, potentially on video, definitely on audio. I don't know what we're going to do with this one. We'll see how it shakes out. I'm in the warehouse with the backdrop behind me. Dev's in his office. Dev, how you doing? Let's bring you in here.
You didn't do on my normal intro. How are you doing?
Yeah. In the studio with me today is
Dev.
There we go. You happy? It's been a while, and I want to kind of preface this. This will be a pretty quick record. We did have a little pause. We occasionally throughout the year we have little pauses. This recent pause has been, and I think we might have alluded to this maybe once before. We're trying to align our last show of the year with episode 100. So that's super exciting, right? So yep. we're coming close to 100. People might think, oh, it's only 100. I mean, that's years worth of shows. I mean, people are like, oh, it should take you 2 years because if you do it every week, well, that it doesn't work that way in life. You got holidays and you got time off, you got things going on, you got work stuff. So, we do have starts and stops throughout the year. So that we're coming out of one of them right now, and we're going to finish the year strong. We're going to have a turkey special, then a holiday special that's going to wrap into our 100th year. So, I know I'm looking forward to that. How about you, Dev?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Like you said, it was a nice little pause here for various different reasons and things like that. So, I'm excited for episode 100. I haven't been a part of all of them, but it's definitely exciting. Not many shows make it this far. So we'll see.
That is true. And, one of the things we were going to do was have our Ignite show as episode 100, because the first show we had was the Ignite show. But then I started thinking, I think our prediction show wrapping up the year, capping, that's a good capstone, right?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So those, if this makes the video, those seeing the scroller below, the Technology Architecture Solution Engineering Show is brought to you by Aspirant. So please visit Aspirant at www.aspirant.com. You're going to notice I have in my show notes, which I didn't share with you, by the way. So this is going to be farm fresh for you. One of the things that, I have to kind of bring up is some of the blurring of our shows. We had a show before that kind of showed what all the different things we have. We got a show for IT pro activities that I do, and also for some of the charitable things we do on the other show. And then we have the technology show, which is, Aspirant sponsored. I've been having those conversation with shows with a lot of Aspirant people, not because it's low hanging fruit, that I've heard some things throughout our tenure there this past year that led me to want to share that with other business leaders and other IT pros. So I kind of dragged them along over to the other side, even though this is the one that is sponsored by Aspirant. I dragged them over there for that, to get exposure over there to, that audience, because I think there's a lot of good things over there for people to hear and see. So one of the recent ones, I don't know if you saw the latest conversation that was released out on LinkedIn and YouTube, Dev. Did you happen to check the one out with Mike McLean?
I didn't check it out, but I knew it was with Mike McLean, but I didn't have a chance to check it out yet.
Check it out. Come on, man.
I've been in Despair Alley. For a long time.
Yeah. So those who don't know, Despair Alley is that space where you wind up working through a trade show or a learning show or event. We've been super busy finishing the year really strong. The Cloud Solutions team and Aspirant, a lot of activity, a lot of year-end stuff that we're finishing up and trying to make sure that our client base gets satisfied with what's going on with their budgets and their cycles and their technology wrap-ups. So we will be having, this is kind of a little bit of a plug for Aspirant. We will be having an event, a webinar for our Ignite impressions, more along the lines, not casual like this, more formalized, the webinar, where we're going to break down each one of the lanes that we have from Azure and infrastructure, modern workplace, data and AI and security, some of the top announcements and what those ramifications are for businesses. So this is kind of the prelude, almost, dare I say, trailer for that. So I wanted to take today, because we need to get back on the wagon to make sure that we're getting the messaging out to people on technology. We wanted to make sure that we're satisfying that need early and often on what was said at Ignite. So I know you didn't really get to experience the full breadth of it live. You've been living in the backpack there, but a couple of the things that like kind of hit me right off the bat was, obviously the keynotes are always good. Some of the things that we discuss around security and some of those changes are definitely good. There's been announcements around, if you remember from mid-year, there was an announcement about Power BI being able to be charged monthly, right? Well, there's some other services that are available to be charged monthly now, as opposed to prepaying for them. So you're going to hear a lot of that kind of stuff during that webinar, but I wanted to touch on a couple things. So, Endpoint Manager has the ability now to have compliance checks for Linux desktops, and people might be like, yawn, what is that? I mean, that's like, but that's important, right? There are organizations that have Linux desktops and Linux servers and Linux solutions. That was one of the key things that I thought from a security perspective that Microsoft's doing, is not just covering up their own products, they're reaching well beyond their own products into other clouds and to on-premises and other operating systems. So I don't know if you had a chance to check that out, but I know there's several companies that I deal with on a regular basis that have developers that are developing inside of Linux desktops, whether they're native on hardware or if they're VMs. It's just that mindset for certain types of development and those types of individuals. I think it gives flexibility to help enable people. What are your thoughts on that particular announcement?
No, I think it's good. I mean, I think like you had said that, Microsoft, I think over the recent years has been more open-minded with different platforms and things like that, and I think that's critical when you're trying to reach a bigger audience and support a wider audience and things like that, especially with their obviously not related to Linux specifically, but with the open data sourcing and with their .NET and all that type of stuff. Yep. They've been more open to collaborating with their partners and collaborating with other competitors in the space, and more of a frenemies, if you will, type of vibe to it. Yep. And I mean, at the same time, even though there's Linux boxes out there and people are using them, I mean, Windows is still the most used operating system in the world. So it's not like they're hindering their own product by doing so. If anything, they're ingratiating themselves to those people who use those tools. So, I think that's probably the most critical piece of it, is that, ingratiating yourselves to those people, it only can help you down the road.
So keeping with that theme, the other announcement was there's going to be a preview in Q1 of calendar 22 of being able to deploy DMG type applications to manage Macs. So, when I first saw that announcement, I was kind of like, I'm not a Mackie person, right? I'm not an iThing kind of a guy. And so, I scratched my head, but then I realized, I was like, oh, you know what? There's a lot of people using Mac, even during the day job, there's several people that we deal with on a regular basis that are Mac people. So sitting there and looking at how we're able to use, the Intune MDN agent for Macs to be able to, deploy, well, first of all, store the DMG and then deploy it in the way that you want it to be deployed is super nice, right? It has the workflow of, being able to support standard support through Intune of required, uninstall, or available. So that's pretty awesome that they're enabling more and more for operating systems. It's about the people at this point, not about the platform, or I should say the end user platform, because the back end platform is able to support all that. And keeping with that theme, again, I'm going to bundle these all together before I toss it back to you, is just-in-time registration for iOS and iPad OS, the setup assistant with Modern Auth. So in other words, for those who are, I people, or you can do automatic device enrollment with Macs a lot cleaner. First half of 22, you're going to have this just-in-time registration model being able to roll out. So I have conversations all the time from security perspective of like, what tool should we use? We need to find third-party tools. We need to use, how are we going to have our apps deployed through the Mac store or Play Store? There's all these disparate solutions to accommodate a small subset of users that may be Mac users. But then if you really think of it, there's whole industries out there that are mostly Mac, right? So if you think of, photography and, media marketing, a lot of that world is heavily Mac because that's, that hardware and that software, there's a lot of it tailored towards it. Not saying there aren't options on the PC side. I am a PC. I am an Android. But just kind of being able to have this set up and work well is pretty awesome that they're enabling even more deeper controls. Is this a enablement piece? Is this goodwill, or is this we can cover this, so use our platform? Thoughts?
It's probably a little bit of both, honestly. I think, especially when you talk about managing Macs in the past, it's always been a third-party platform. The one that I think is Jabber, it's called, or something like that. Yep. Escapes me right now, but the people have leaned on that in the past for Macs, while you've had Config Man for Windows devices and things like that. So I think it's about, we can cover this. You don't need to use a third-party tool to cover this anymore, as far as supporting Macs and iPad and iOS and all that good stuff. Yeah. But also it's about kind of like what I said before, ingratiating yourself to those people platform, because at the end of the day, nowadays everything's subscription based from a software standpoint. It doesn't matter what device you have in your hand. You can access that same service. Yeah, it might be a little bit different, maybe, depending on what device you're using and what platform, whether it be Apple or Android or Windows or, whatever floats your boat. But I think at the end of the day, I personally have an iPad and I have an Android phone. Because I like that variety, and since the services I use Google for my personal stuff, usually for like photos, and I have Microsoft for my files and things like that. And I can access it the same way across all my different devices. Maybe the experience is a bit different for different things because they like to deploy different features for different devices at different times. I'll never understand that. But at the end of the day, it's, you can access these services anywhere. So the service should be able to support all the devices. So
for a while there, the Teams client on iOS was far better than the Teams client on Android. I mean, some of those features seem to get there before it hit Android.
I'm still pounding the drum. Hopefully I can generate some of the same magic you did for Teams background. Can we get an Android Auto Teams app so we can join meetings from Android Auto and not just have that reserved for CarPlay? Like, that'd be a game changer for me, especially if I'm taking calls on the road or something like that.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't understand why they're shirking us Android Auto users. But I'm always looking at the user voice and the roadmap to see what's going on.
So Android Auto gives me challenges. Just in general. So one of the reasons we timed our year end our sabbatical, I was away for a little bit on holiday or vacation. I don't know why I called it holiday. I guess because the rest of the world calls it holiday. But anyways, so I was away, and I was lucky enough from where we went to get a rental car, which they were really hard to get. I've never seen the rental lot in this particular place we went so empty in my life, and it wasn't because people were all running around renting cars. But I plugged my phone in to charge it, and I was like, "Woo, Android Auto," and I'm like, oh, I don't want to talk to my head unit to put a maps location in because I have everything all pre-stored. And especially the place we went, I had all the locations. I created a list inside of Google Maps so I can just touch and go. So I'm always unplugging it, getting to the regular app, because it just wouldn't work on the head unit. And I'm just like swinging a miss.
That's usually what you want to use. I mean, for Android Auto, it pulls it from your phone. So
it wasn't pulling I wasn't able to access my list of saved locations to be able to just touch and go. It was quite an anomaly. So I wind up, and then there's multiple charging ports in here. So the family was with me and they're plugging their phones in, like, which phone do you want to use Android Auto on? And then, one of my children's just like, use mine, boom. And then like Maps is just like, it was less than ideal. So, anyways, I digress. I think the point that I'm making is that from our previous conversation here is that they're enabling more and more devices that are not native Windows devices. They have integrations and controls in place for businesses that want to use, or at least allow their people to use, iOS devices or Mac OS devices. There's a lot more controls and capabilities to be able to deliver the same apps that we're delivering to PC and to Android. I'm a big Android fan. I got Samsung devices, a lot of them. I struggle with, do I get a Surface Pro or do I just stay with the S7 Plus? And every time I have it in the cart, anybody that listens to this show, it's in the cart and then it comes right back out of the cart, because there's nothing that S7 Plus can't do, because the apps are everywhere for me now. So, and then you layer in Windows 365 on top of that. You can run Windows Desktop on top of your Mac, not using any kind of crazy configuration, not doing any kind of buy boot or dual boot, buy OS type thing. You don't need to do any of that. You can have your desktop running in the cloud if there is Windows native things that you need. So I think this enablement has been there for a long while, but we're seeing it coming at mass with those little delta gaps that allow businesses to capture Mac and capture iOS devices from a management or deployment perspective. It's there now, right?
Yeah.
And then you take a look at, and I'm going to toss this to you for your thoughts, right? So I want an immediate reaction. What are your thoughts on Windows 11 running native Android apps, but they are only available through the Amazon store? Go.
It's a Frankenstein monster. It's interesting. I mean, it probably came down to financial business deals in the back end and how that works out, because I'm sure there's no reason why Microsoft has never partnered with Amazon on anything else in this type of realm of reality. So the only thing I could fathom is that the financial deals or whatever business deals that were happening to make this available on Windows 11 fell through with Samsung or Google or whatever, and that's why they turned to Amazon, and that's what happened. That's my guess.
Samsung store is not something
not really. It's more so Google. Yeah.
It's more the Play Store, if you will.
Yeah, the Google Play Store. It's the only thing it's purely speculation on my part, but it's the only thing I could think of. Is historically, especially now with the cloud wars with AWS and Azure, Microsoft and Amazon don't usually play well with one another. At least when they don't go out of their way to do so, I would say. Yeah. So that's why it's very interesting. I think that's it's curious. I would like to know what went into that decision, but I assume it probably has to do with business deals.
It could have, or it could also be that the AWS ecosystem for app deployment is grand, right? Yeah. And there might be some integrations there that will allow for more seamless apps to be deployed. So the challenge that I have, and this is one of the reasons why that I've looked at tablets. Sometimes I want some cheapo tablets because I use for some of the video stuff I do for corporations and or for speaking arrangements. Sometimes I'll have to do some pre-recorded stuff, and I'll have either a deck or something I need a speaker view, or I need a caption. Machines, I'll like put Nano Tele on there or something like that, and I won't need an S7. I don't need to drop $1,500 or $1,800 on a tablet for closed captioning or a slide box. And one of the things that I always looked at was, hey, let's just grab one of these Amazon devices, because you can get a 10-inch Amazon for like $98, and the screens are nice, and I know people that have them, and movies look nice. I mean, they're nice looking devices, but they're not Play Store enabled. You'd have to sideload all your apps, right? So if I have an investment in some paid apps, like some of these media apps I have, some of them are paid apps. Now, mind you, $3.99 isn't a deal breaker, but still, nonetheless, it's one of those things where I'm going to have to rebuy it, right? Because it's licensed through each individual marketplace. Yep. So am I really going to I'll maybe benefit if the same app on the Play Store is available on the Amazon store. If it's there and it's a no charge app, sure. I'm not sure. I'm just not sure, right? And can you sideload APKs with this Android support? Because if you can sideload APKs, then I don't care. I'll just rip an APK off. And for those that don't know, maybe on the business side, APK is the format of the app that gets packaged for Android. It's an APK file. Yeah. And you have to turn developer options on your phone. So if your organization ever made its own app and didn't deliver it through the Play Store, you have to go developer mode on your phone to sideload it into your device in order to make it available to you. Yeah. So I was curious on what your thoughts were on that. And, it could be business deals. It could be maybe compatibility with what the market has been deploying apps on. And I think I would really like to see what the segregation of the actual apps that require cloud services, how many of them are in Azure versus GCP versus AWS. I mean, AWS has been around a lot longer, so it might have that footprint, and it is very developer friendly when it comes to just Wild West, and not identity and access controls as tight as it is on Azure. And I'm sure the comments will explode on that statement, but I stand behind it. So what were your anything you've looked at in the backpack, anything around interoperability? That's kind of what we're talking about today. If you haven't figured that out, interoperability, management of all these other solutions. We have further expansion, some announcements, further expansions with Azure Arc in your on-premises systems and in other clouds. There's been a lot of movement towards that way. Anything else stand out to you?
I haven't been able to dive into the backpack too much because even after the conference was over, I was still huddled in a corner in an empty conference building, in Despair Alley for the most part. But no, I think, I don't know if this maybe not necessarily goes into the interop topic of the discussion, but I watched a lot of the keynotes, and I'm still trying to figure out why Microsoft Loop is a thing. And
belay that conversation. We're gonna have one of our run-ins up to there is going to be around. It's going to be a collaboration topic, and that'll be one of those. So
that's my first thought coming out of Ignite. I was like, why? I don't know, but anyway,
that wasn't your first thought coming out of Ignite. After that syllable left their mouth about Loop, immediately my teams blew up for me, like, what?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah, exactly. Why? So
I understand why, and the need for fluid framework to be more than it is, especially when you look at the Notion world, the Mural world, so there is a need to be able to stack and aggregate and have a file structure and a place to just grab snippets and lay down. Again, stay tuned to this space. We'll talk about that in depth.
But there's that, and I think with the Azure Arc piece, I did watch the session with that. I think they're bringing more Azure Arc to the Stack HCI and things like that. And Azure Arc obviously is changed the game for a lot of the different people as far as managing everything through Azure and everything like that. So, but I haven't had a chance to dive a ton into the backpack, and as far as specific things around the interop, I haven't had a chance to dive a lot into that.
Yeah, for sure. Before we sign off, we got a couple more points to make, but I also want to, again, bring attention to Aspirant, our key sponsor. In previous shows, we've had some really produced spots, commercial style. These stream live a lot, so I want to make sure that we're making sure we give a tip of the hat to the Aspirant team. So please check the show notes and follow some links. You can find the cloud team. All the stuff we talk about here, the cloud team at Aspirant can help, but there's also other offerings there. They're a management consulting team as well as technology consultants. So definitely check out aspirant.com, and stay tuned to some things that are going to be good going on here, right? we have some giveaways coming up. We're going to put some links on the next show for Aspirant hat and mug, and an opportunity for you to get some cloud services from the team there. So definitely stay in touch with us. Make sure that on LinkedIn, you can message me directly, or anyone at Aspirant. You can reach out to us through our website too as well. So make sure you stay close to that space. And again, Mike McLean, CEO of Aspirant, was on the IT Pro Show, a conversation with. I'll put a link in the show notes here. So if you haven't had a chance to check that out, please do. I also had Dean Campbell. He was on too as well. He's in our technology chain. So he oversees a lot of that space. So we appreciate Aspirant sponsoring the show. You can always follow me on Twitter at PrimeD3. As I told Christopher List, one day there'll be the story where that came from. It'll be underwhelming. It will be. People are like, oh, really? But one day that'll get out there. And also you can follow Mr. Devlin at DevlinMD13 on Twitter. You can always find us both on LinkedIn too as well. So is there any other interoperability or anything you wanted to bring up about Ignite that came out? Again, the tone is being more than just Windows, being more than just PC. Is there anything that comes to mind, or that you've seen recently that may have been brought up during that show?
Yeah, so I did see one thing after I was going through the Rolodex of the sessions that I've had a chance to look at. But the Android open source project, which is an interesting piece, and they're adding Microsoft's adding support for that in October, or this past October, I should say. And they added the ability to manage devices that are running the Android open source project. And Endpoint Manager. But the problem with this is that there is the Google mobile services for Google Play Store, things like that. The Android open source project can't access those services, so we can't deploy apps or anything like that. It can't be managed very well. So there's apparently a new management approach. I don't know if you've heard about that or if you have any color on that, but I think that's an interesting piece, because before the session, I actually hadn't heard of the Android open source project. Mm-hmm. So I was didn't know that was a thing. There's so much in the technology world that you sometimes just skips by you. But what are your thoughts on that? Where do you think it's going?
Yeah. So again, if you listen to some of the Bass shows, I have a passion for IoT. I have a passion for a lot of the things that are mobile and, interactive. And this touches on some of those parts of my brain. So there is a historical change by being able to enable this, right? You're able to, wire into devices and systems and apps in ways that we weren't able to do before, where we were at the mercy of the OS or code provider, right? So now there is going to be a tailored approach. Just as I mentioned earlier, the way we're approaching, I say we, when I say we, I say technologists and using the Microsoft stack, and Microsoft specifically. I'm not saying we as in Microsoft. I have to clarify that. But the way we approach it is always been, how do we manage it? What are we going to do with it once the code in the OS or the device that's running the code is out in the wild? So as we talked about earlier at the top of the hour, enabling more services and devices through Intune or Endpoint Manager is the key differentiator, right? So there's going to be some changes in how you interface with these open source type OSs. Android is kind of Linuxy, right? So we can handle that through Endpoint Manager if we have the approach and the right kind of the way to get at the device through Endpoint Manager. So I think that's going to be the key hook. And when I say Android is kind of Linuxy, Android is Linuxy. Just to kind of set the stage, we were on a Boeing 767 over the Pacific during vacation, and the media center that ran everything did a kind of a refresh or reboot, and all the screens kind of did a flicker, and a message came across, and my child immediately said, "That's Android." I said, "That's Linux." And he's like, "No, that's Android." And then we looked at the libraries, and I was like, that's Android. Because the way the libraries were, the specific libraries is something that is Android-y, right? And I was like, but I think it's Linux. I don't think the airlines are going to tell us what they're using for their media, but we had a debate for like 20 minutes on a string of code that came up. Only us would do that, right? But it's being able to have a device that you can actually have support and management around is important, and being able to develop solutions inside of your framework, be it a managed Linux desktop, a managed Windows desktop, or a managed iOS device or macOS device, is important, but also the target thing you're developing for needs to be able to be supported and connected to. And I think that this is where this comes into play, right? So if we're able to, provide new hooks with Endpoint Manager, which is kind of the path that's the security episode we're going to have in episode 94 or what have you. We're going to talk a little security. If we keep heading the way we're heading, we're managing a bunch of devices and OSs. We're also securing a bunch of devices and OSs, and that includes some of these open source, like some of the Linux ports, or in this case, the Android open source project. Make sense? Does that help at all? Probably does not.
No, I think it does. No, because I hadn't heard of the Android open source project before, and I'm curious because I think like Linux, like you said, Android. There's a ton of different flavors of Android, and with Samsung overlaying their One UI, and then yep. I don't know why this came to mind, but you have the hydrogen phones. Shout out Shaunus on those from years ago, but. And it's what it comes down to is that, especially with, working from home now, I'm sure there's probably a decent amount of organizations that probably have transitioned to BYOD, and lots of people have different devices, and, sometimes you need the ability to support that. And Intune's a great tool to do that, especially just from, wiping work data and not touching personal data. Yep. Especially with phones and even with computers and Macs and Windows and the whole gamut of devices. Yep. So it's definitely critical at this point to be able to manage those devices, and especially with probably more people using their own devices, and to be able to have that delineation of work versus personal data. I think is critical. So
yep, absolutely. I think we made it through a show that doesn't require any edits.
I think we did. We did.
This might be the first one in 92 episodes. We made it. We didn't have to do an edit, right? Wait, yeah, this is episode 92, so maybe we're finally starting to get there. There is like 30 seconds left in the show, so we could screw it up and have to edit the end. But
I didn't cough or say excuse me or anything like that.
On that note, I wanted to say, viewers, thank you. We appreciate you as viewers. Listeners, as always, we have overwhelming support for this show, not only from Aspirant, our key sponsor, but also from you, the listeners. That's what keeps this show going. When we stop and we look at the various devices, kind of marrying the conversation today, the various devices and people and where we're listened to around the globe, we really, truly appreciate you as listeners. We'll have a special message for all you on episode 100. So, make sure you listen all the way up to, we're going to be giving some key things away along that way too, as well. So thank you all again. Look in the show notes for any relevant announcements and or links to what we've talked about today and how to reach us. Comment in all the various platforms, wherever you're at. We appreciate it. Have a great day. Dev, sign us out.
Bye.
There we go.